Hello, everyone. I'm so excited today because we have an amazing guest on this show or this program. His name is Josh Stinton. I don't know him very well, but I've met him a few times because we're in the same speaking agency here in Norway. And he's such a fascinating guy. He has made up a fusion between adventure and charity, which I absolutely love. And he's also a lot into working to make the lives of children better, which is one of my core missions in this life. And he has so many brilliant perspectives, stories to share with us. So I'm very happy to introduce you, Josh.
Hello,
Welcome.
Steve. Thank you for having me.
I've been looking forward to this because normally when we meet, it's quite hectic and there's a lot happening. And now we have some time just to get to know you better and to learn from your story and what drives you and yeah, just who you are really.
I've really been looking forward to this conversation because you're right. I mean, as you said, we're both in the same speaking agency, and when we meet, it's usually around a lot of speakers, and all those speakers have brilliant stories. So it's like sound bites, just like sponging up all this excitement and information, and yeah. So it's really nice to sit down and have a chat with your good self and just catch up.
Yes. So thank you for setting up that time. And could you please just start to tell us a bit about your ongoing project right now? What's happening these days?
What's next?
Yes.
So this is it's funny, right? Me a number of years ago would never imagine that I would be sitting in this seat in Oslo, Norway, and having this conversation with you about this. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to become the first person in the world to run through the sky. Yeah, I'll say that again. I'm going to be the first person in the world to run through the sky, just in case people are like, no.
You're going to run through the sky.
Yeah.
That's like mind blowing, just those words put together.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
And so how this came to be, so what I do is I take on some of the hardest physical challenges in the world in things I have no idea how to do in order to raise awareness and money for children's causes around the world. Every challenge that I take on is to represent a new children's charity. And it's, with all due respect to myself, it's like a glorified hobby, right? Like I don't earn any money from them. I never, ever will, never want to. 100% of the money I raise goes directly to the kids. But I've completed 5 big challenges so far. And the next one coming up, the 6th, is by far going to be the biggest. So the Sky Run. And the idea came to mind when I was bicycling across the Atlantic Ocean in 2019, which was my 5th challenge.
I think you have to say that again as well. I mean, it's something you've never heard before, really.
Yeah. And people watch this like, seriously, you have a very, very bizarre, probably mentally not well person in your conversation right now. But yeah, so that was my 5th challenge. I wanted to be the first person in the world to bicycle across the sea and did that. And there's a big story around that as well. But going into the Sky Run, so what happened is I'm on a bike, on a boat, and I worked with these brilliant engineers out of the UK in Leamington, England, and set up this basically like a bicycle gimbal, right? So like a hammock. So the bike was always straight, no matter what the sailboat was doing underneath it. Of course, there was a lot of waves and all that over it, but that way the bike was straight. So, and I also instead of doing a normal diamond back frame where you're up over the bike, I did a recumbent bike where I'm sat down and pedaling out in front of me. So that way I was lower on the boat for wind and waves and all that to go over. Mm-hmm. So I'm out there in the middle of the ocean, and I realized one thing, there's nothing in the sky, right? And that's weird. Like I look out the window now and I see birds go by. It's calming, but I didn't see any planes. I wasn't on under a flight path, and I didn't see any birds. Of course, I didn't see any birds. There's nothing for them to land on, and I didn't. It just got me thinking. Wow, the sky's just completely empty, and I saw it day after day.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking. Well, I was delirious and quite tired and slightly bored because I'm just out there cycling all the time.
How many days did that take, that challenge?
15. It was, yeah. And it took me, I was cycling for 6,434 kilometers between Gran Canaria and St. Lucia. And so, yeah, that's a whole conversation in and of
Yes,
itself.
it is. Okay, but you were looking at the sky and it was empty, and
So I'm out there. I'm on the top deck of this sailboat,
yeah,
and I'm not powering the boat with a bike. By the way, I'm racing it. So there's a crew. They're sailing it,
yes.
and I'm set up to a resistance mechanism to where I'm counting the kilometers as I go. So I have to sail more kilometers every day than the boat sailed. So basically, I'm racing it. So I'm out there on the boat and thinking about the sky. Then I started thinking, how have we as people interacted with the sky? And my mind's just kind of spinning off. And then I thought, how cool would it be if you could figure out a way to power an airship, like a blimp, like a big helium balloon, by running, right?
Wow.
Surely there was a way. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, I'll set up a treadmill kind of thing underneath an airship and set up like an axle with a couple of carbon propellers to make the thing go forward.
It's almost like I'm picturing this hamster wheel running.
Funny you say that, actually.
Wow.
Perfect. Because what happened is, obviously I didn't have internet out in the sea, so I had to wait. I didn't know if anyone's attempted this. I didn't know how to do it. And as soon as I got to St. Lucia, connected to Wi-Fi and Googled it, and no one's ever run through the sky. So I flew home to Norway, and the first thing I did, I don't know anyone in aviation, but I found the Norwegian Civil Aviation Authority up in the north. And so I just Googled them and found it. So I just called them, and this lovely poor woman answers the phone. And she's like, yeah, it's the Civil Aviation Authority. And I said, hi, my name is Josh. I'm an adventurer, and I'm going to be the first person to run through the sky. I just need to talk to someone about how to get a permit for that. And it's just like, serious, just like dead silence. I thought she hung up. And then she's like, I'm going to transfer you. I'm like, okay. She sends me over to another guy, this guy named Arnold. Turns out he's the head of Norwegian airspace. And he loved the idea. And then he asked, are you an engineer? No, I'm not. And then he got serious and was like, you're not allowed to build that then. I'm like, no, I know that.
Yeah.
So I said, who do you recommend? I said, NTNU University. Reached out to them, speaking with the head of technical engineering. And he asked if he could bring a friend into the conversation. And that friend happens to be a guy named Kevin Ford, who's the previous director of the International Space Station for NASA. And so now NASA, NTNU are involved, and it's just become this huge project. And the captain of the ship that helped me build that bicycle gimbal is back on the team for this challenge. And he's working with carbon composite manufacturers in the south of England to build a hamster wheel, because they realized that a hamster wheel is going to get much more power than just a normal treadmill. So I think he loved that conversation. He called me up. He's like, "Hey, mate, just a bit of an update. We're going to be chucking you into a hamster wheel, all right?" I'm like, "What?" It's like, yeah. So get ready for those memes.
Yes. Oh wow! It's such a. It's so mind blowing, and just the fact that you're sitting there on a sailboat cycling. It's just all of these components, and you're making it happen.
Yeah.
And that's so inspiring, really.
Yeah.
Because I think we are sometimes very rigid in our thinking, and we're in our boxes, and we are raised in a society where things are supposed to be in a certain way. And I just love that you're going to run through the sky. Yeah. That's going, man on the moon is not that fascinating anymore. I think running through the sky will be the next thing.
Yeah,
wow.
I'm gonna hold the first ever calisthenics class on the moon next. But but it's just important to be playful, isn't it? We've talked about this before. It's just so we make a conscious decision in life on how hard we want things to be or how accessible we want things to be. And I have learned that the more play that we put into things, which instantly makes us take ourselves less seriously. Mm-hmm. Because I'm no good at sports. I'm no good at any of the stuff that I've done. I'm not out there just sitting athletic.
There must be something about you. when you first did your first challenge in 2016, it was Vasaloppet, and you had never skied before, and you
Yep.
just went straight in there.
Yep.
With
The morning of the race was the first time I ever had skis on my feet.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that's not considered normal, you know?
Right.
So
Right.
there is something about you. I mean, there is something about how you just jump into things, or how you see things in a different way, or the mindset you have around just jumping into this. I'm curious about that. Like,
Sure.
where did this come from? And that's your courage to do it, but also this, you must have some certainty or some belief that makes you do this.
Absolutely. It's first off, I think everyone alive has the ability to write a life story that they would love to read.
Hmm.
All of us, right?
Oh, I love that.
And I think that's a challenge. And once I kind of connected with that,
Hmm.
I learned that if my life story is a book, and I'm turning those pages, and I'm getting kind of bored reading it.
Hmm.
Not that everything has to be adventure. Everyone's story is different. Everyone's book that they would love to read is gonna. That's why we have many styles of books.
Yes.
Everyone's gonna have their own type of thing, but you have to connect with the narrative that your story is.
Mm.
And if you were gonna keep reading that book, like turn the pages, like stay up all night and read that book, love it, like that's how we ought to be living life.
Yeah.
And once you kind of connect with what that story is, then it shifts, right?
Mm.
And to me, it's not just goals. Goals are great. We've got to have goals, but goals, in my mind, are actually just milestones in the creation of your identity. So, goals are fleeting. We and again, I don't want to be quoted in being against goals, but they're great, but they're fleeting. And even if you achieve them, or if you don't achieve them, it's okay, because you're still developing your identity along the way. And I think all too often we get hung up on goals, and that'll be too hard, a little bit too tricky. So therefore, I'm just not going to do that thing. I'm just going to stay the course of what I've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the book isn't super in line with what it is that I want, but I'm okay.
Yes. I'm okay.
I'm in a massive war against okay. Oh, oh.
Oh, yeah. I'm okay. And I'll just do this until I'm 67. And then when I retire, I can start doing fun things again.
Yeah, I'll start traveling at 65.
Yeah, that will be great.
Yeah.
Or at least I'm looking forward to the weekends.
Oh,
Oh, that's another one. I know.
oh.
But so many people are living like this.
Yeah,
And of course there's a lot of reasons for that. But
absolutely.
again, you're so you're in this percentage of people who are living more fully, or who are taking more chances, or who are more courageous and less scared about stuff. That's my assumption. So what about the 10 first years of your life?
Yep. That's actually that's a perfect segue, because the challenges and like the adventure elements in my life are brilliant. But that's the thing, is I kind of have a bit of a thing with the word adventurer, because we're all adventurers. I mean, it just the fact that we are a composite of the the biological beginnings and the way in which life started for all of us kind of constitutes us all as adventurers. Like, we've all gone through a lot just to be here.
Yeah.
And it's not so much all that that's given me the spice and meaning in my life, but it's the purpose, as you've said before. So every challenge that I take on is to help children's causes around the world, kids in need. And that goes back to my childhood. Because when I was a kid, so I'm from Colorado originally. I lived in Australia for 14 years, so my accent is just a mess. So excuse me for that. But I went through, and is the connection okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, perfect. So I went through when I was a young guy, I had a grandfather. Both my grandparents. I would go off when I was a kid and raised in Colorado, and I would go spend my time with my grandparents in South Dakota.
Oh.
And my grandfather would we would go out for rides together, and he would, as we were driving, because he would take these rides that we would do in his truck, he would put a bunch of either food or goods or materials that he would go around and give to other people, other families in the community.
Yeah, just to help them out.
What's that, sorry?
Yeah, just to help them out and be kind.
Yeah,
And yeah.
absolutely right. So it was all about how do we, it was just giving. And to him, it was really interesting. So I was about 7 years old, 6, 7 years old. And one summer I remember very in particular, and we were driving around and we were going off on just normal rounds to give things to the neighbors. And when I say neighbors, I mean, it's kind of generous. We lived in the farm country, so neighbors were like a 5-6 mile drive away.
Yeah. Wow.
So we were driving, and I remember looking at him because we would go around and giving food away and various things. And I remember asking him, I said, Grandpa, like, why are you doing this for free? Because in my young mind, I'm thinking, if we got paid for that stuff, that's probably more toys I'm gonna get. So and Siri, he was like, he's the loveliest man. He's always joking and really full of life and love and just a great person. Then he got very serious. Yeah. And he looked over while we were driving and said, Joshua? I was like, what? And he said, what we're doing right now is our job, ultimately. He goes, there's other things that we do, but what we're doing right now is our duty. And he said, if you have the opportunity to help other people, it's not an opportunity, it's a responsibility. So what you're seeing right now is the job that we need to be doing. And it's like, ooh, that's fascinating. And that stuck in at like a young age. So my whole life growing up, and my brothers as well, like all of us, we volunteer time, we give in various ways. And I'm just really, really thankful that a number of things happened in my life at the right time that brought me into this world of work and adventure that I do now, because that is like, I'm not a farmer, so I don't have tools or food to give to people. And if I was a farmer, I'd be a very hungry person because I'd be an awful farmer. But what I have is time. And so what I do with my time is I create these big stories, these adventures, and use them to help children's causes. So it's kind of been a part of life all the way through. My family loves it.
Yeah. Wow. And what was so you have this experience with your granddad, and do you have memories of like people really believing in you and empowering you and giving you this this sense of, I can do this. I have the ability to do it, but I also have the strengths to actually make a change in the world. Do you have any memories of how that mindset started, growing stronger in you?
Siri, if we took a break in this conversation right now and called my mom on FaceTime,
yes,
and if I told my mom completely out of nowhere in a conversation with us, if I said to her, I want to lay an egg, my mom would, without hesitation, say, Joshua, you will lay the best egg. It was just that growing up, just constant, like, you will do that. That will be great. And she's just that way, with like my brothers and I, and it was always really driven into us that, first off, thoughts are things. This is, I remember when I was I've never said this on a podcast. This is quite fun. But my mom said, when I'd come into the living room for instance, and be upset about something. So I was a kid and life was tough sometimes, whatever. And I remember my mom would always she'd ask myself and my brothers the same thing. She'd say, what reality are you creating right now? I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, because everything that you're frustrated about is starting from the way you're perceiving it. And that's a thought. So you have an opportunity to re-perceive it and create a new thought to create a new thing. And we just grew up with these tools. We were constantly told this as we were growing up. And then after a while, it just sunk in. And it's so true. Like, everything we experience, this streaming platform, the laptop I'm looking at right now, everything started as an idea from someone. A woman or man out there had something in their head and created a thing in the world. Everything. And so why can't we design our lives driven by the thoughts and inspiration we have naturally within ourselves? That went deep.
Wow. I love it. And I would really like to FaceTime your mom one day. Because that makes me curious about her. And of course, I started actually with mental training when I was 11, 12 years old. I read The Inner Game of Tennis at that age.
Oh, such a good book.
Yeah, I know. And that book is very well renowned, even outside of tennis, of course. It's like it's an important book. So I've been training my thoughts and all about mindset and these things, but I'm also very, fascinated by emotions and how they are wired in us, and how all our physical system, how that, just sometimes reacts to things that we don't even understand because it's triggers from childhood. And so all of this, of course, is a super long conversation. But I'm also thinking about, the emotions that we have as children, and which needs are being met and which needs are not being met, and how that affects us later on. So, but I guess you also managed to get your needs met, and that you were emotionally okay as a child.
I did, but I mean, I'm happy to be vulnerable and quite transparent about this, because as we're talking about it, I'm very proud to have had really strong, caring parents. But those strong, caring parents split when I was 6 years old, right? And a lot of us are growing up with different, multiple houses and all that in our lives. I remember from a young age, because when we split, so this is quite interesting, but when they split, my mom moved to Minnesota and my dad was in Colorado. So that meant from the age of about 6, I was on a plane constantly between the two. So I'd spend summer here, go to school there. But then both families also moved around a lot, because it was the nature of the work that both my father and stepfather were in. There was a lot of moving around. And that had me, I went to over 20 different schools as a kid.
Oh, wow. 20?
20.
Wow.
I was constantly the new kid.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of, kind of reinventing, relearning. You're in a new environment. I thought it was super weird that kids in Minnesota had different accents from me in Colorado. I was like, well, they talk so funny, all but new environments. Then after a while, I really hungered for that. Like it was so fun. Well, I say fun now. 7-year-old Josh would be like, yeah, fun, buddy. Yeah, sure. No, but it's looking back, it was so incredible for me to have the experiences that I did as a young person, and having the care and support that I did, but that stress. And so I kind of had to have a mindset. I don't want to over credit myself with being this emotionally intelligent as a young person. Maybe it just accidentally happened, but you had to have a mindset of adaptability and resilience.
Yes. That was the survival strategy as well. I mean, you just had to do it. Yeah.
Totally.
There's no choice. Yeah.
Yeah. It's exciting. As we said, supporting these children's causes. Oh, Sarah, I could go on for hours about the things that I've learned from kids.
Yeah.
Which I know you know very well. And
no, I'm learning new things every day, and I guess the curiosity is coming from somewhere, and actually curiosity itself is very inspiring from children, because children are super curious. And I'm also curious about going from child to teenager. And the reason I want to ask you about this is, we know that teenagers these days, they have this, some have difficulties with their health, both physical and mental health, but also this lack of purpose, lack of mission. I really believe that is one of the keys to really lift them and empower teenagers, is to show them in all the ways they can make a change and be a difference, and that they're needed. So do you remember from your teenage years, were you still into this generous giving mode, or were you more like trying to detach from your grandparents or what you have believed as a child?
Great question. I think, I mean, of course, in your teenagers, it's a bit of a storm of emotions and experiences anyway. I mean, I had my period where I had long dyed green hair and played drums in a rock band. So I had all sorts of things going on. But
Wow.
yeah. It was my first car was a 1978 Chevy van, so I could drive my drums around to band practice. It was quite cool. At least I thought I was quite cool.
Yes,
But
I think it sounds cool.
yeah, so but I gotta say, in the high school, like I'm thinking more high school and teenagers, there was probably more me trying to figure out who I was and what I was doing,
Mhm.
and then getting inspiration for what it is I wanted to become.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of time as a teenager, I think the light kind of turned on myself, actually.
Mhm.
I'm thinking this as I'm saying it, but yeah, I think that that's fair to say,
Mhm.
because that's when I really started to put a lot of fire into moving to Australia. You know,
Yeah.
when I really wanted that to become real.
And tell us about how that started. What gave you this curiosity for Australia?
Yeah, that's so funny. So it started when I was 6 years old, and I watched a cartoon, right?
I
And
love it.
so scene setting. I'm from Colorado. I'm in the mountains, like deep into the mountains. I have never seen the ocean in my entire life, my entire 6 years of life. And and I saw this cartoon called Dot and the Whale.
Dot
And
and the whale.
Dot and the Whale. So the young protagonist in this cartoon, an incredible young woman or young girl named Dot, and it was an Australian production. And young Dot saved a whale's life. And so this whale got washed up onto shore, and she organized the community to put towels on it and save the whale's life. And I remember I was blown away by this because, first off, it was a mix between like live action footage and animation. So she was animated, but then the filming of the whale was real, like underwater. And I must have burnt that VHS tape out. I watched it so many times, and I just committed to that. I remember when I was young, I told my mom, like, I'm gonna move to Australia. She's like, okay, all right. And again, she was like, honey, do we know anyone in Australia? I'm like, not yet. Dot, the animated girl that I fell like in love with. Like that, this is what's gonna happen. And it just really sank in from a young age. And so yeah, Australia just kind of became a thing for me. And then yeah, like a number of years later in high school, and I started to realize in the teenage years, like I'm starting to make decisions that are going to shape up what comes next. And I just started to do a lot of the early groundwork on preparing myself financially and emotionally and everything to move to Australia, which it took a number of years, but I did that when I was 24. So yeah, it was quite funny. But yeah, be careful what cartoons you watch, because they might.
But then what happened when you arrived to Australia? How was it compared to your what you thought it was going to be?
Well, I found out there was no animated girls running around, so I was very
Oh,
disappointed about that. But no, it was amazing. Like
yes.
I was just wrapped up into it. I was going to, I went over there on a study visa, so I hadn't gone to university yet, and I probably wasn't going to go. But the reason I went to university is that was the longest visa I could get for Australia. So I went and did my bachelor's, and that was going to be it. Fell in love with the place and stayed and did my master's and ended up staying for 14 years. And until a very chance situation happened when I came to Norway, and then I decided that's the next chapter. So I've been in Norway now for 5 years, and because my family comes from here originally. We're from Haugesund originally.
Wow, that's close to here.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I've got a funny story about that as well. But what happens quickly, so I was in Europe because I did my second challenge was I learned how to unicycle on one wheel. and I took a unicycle off-road down a mountain, 14 kilometers off trail, in the world's biggest mountain unicycle race in San Sebastian, Spain. It was awesome.
That's also crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm in Spain, and I called my dad, and I had this idea. I was like, "Do you want to come over and meet me, and we'll do a road trip around Norway?" It's like, "Yeah, brilliant." So he comes across. I get a hold of my best friend Eric, who lives in Sweden. We studied together in Australia, and Eric runs a small taxi company and an accounting business. He's got a few businesses he's a part of. And he said, if you're going to do a road trip around Norway, I'll loan you a Swedish taxi. Like, brilliant. So it's a Swedish taxi on the side and everything. So I pick up this Swedish taxi, pick up my dad in Trollhättan, where he takes the train into from Rome, because he just happened to go there first and whatever. Pick him up, and we drove to Tromsø, and that was hilarious. 2 American guys in a Swedish taxi in Tromsø, taking photos. We're like, and so what happened is, before I went to Norway, I was on a radio show in Australia that was also broadcast in Norway about how I was going to try to find where my family came from in Norway.
All right.
And now she's become one of my best friends. But my dear friend Susanna Tottenham, yeah. So Susanna heard that interview, reached out, and her mom went to work on helping us figure out where our family came from. And they narrowed it down to around Haugesund. Yeah. And I hadn't met Susanna yet in person.
No.
So we're driving. We went from Bergen towards Stavanger, but we just needed a place to stay in between. So my dad randomly, he gets on the laptop, gets on Airbnb, books a place. And we kind of had a general idea as to where it was going to be. And we rented this beautiful cabin, drove down in, had a conversation with the people, and the guy was very nervous. And he said, I don't know how else to tell you this, but I believe we're related. Like, what? And he brings out, he had a folder of paperwork, and in the back was my grandma. My dad went, "That's my mom." Like, "That's my grandma." They're like, "Yeah, she went to the US," or like, well, it was actually her parents went to the US, and we kind of got it down to her, but lost track after that and didn't know you guys existed. So we thought all of our family went to the US, but it turns out some people stayed behind. And as it would turn out, they were very busy, because I've got quite a bit of family in Haugesund and Ålesund now. So, and more, the cabin that we booked on Airbnb was built by my great-great-grandfather.
Oh, wow. That's almost unbelievable.
Yeah, it's like we just won Alt for Norway, just like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, when we were there, I remember I told my dad, I said, I love living in Australia, but I'm gonna move here now. Yeah. This is it, and that's been it. So went to Australia, sold everything, came out here. I lived in Stavanger for 2 years. Beautiful place. I love it on the west, but I had a lot more media stuff happening over here in Oslo. So now I live in Oslo. Yeah, 3 or 5 years in total in Norway and counting. I love it here.
Brilliant. It's so much fun I mean, this all is just an adventure in itself. And that makes me wonder, like, when you have these extreme days where you do the unicycle, or you're 2 weeks on the ocean, Atlantic crossing, and now you're going to run through the sky next summer. What about your everyday life? Like, how do you create joy and adventures and fun? And I don't know, how do you experience your day-to-day life?
Every day is an adventure. I mean, it sounds so corny, but it is. It's all a build-up to. It's not. Well, after a challenge, there's always a come down, because you build up and then you associate with that for so long. So now I'm going to be the person to run through the sky, and then at some point in time, I will have been the person that ran through the sky, and then there's a bit of a relax around that. So it's not about just seeking the highs, the excitement. Of course, that's exciting, and we all love the idea of Christmas when it's soon to come, and kind of going for these big experiences or whatever we have in our worlds. but it's about appreciating that every single day is a part of that. And that's taken me a long time to learn. And I can tell you, I'm sure I have some ex-girlfriends out there that'd be really surprised that I've actually found that sense of peace in myself, because I'm constantly like looking for like super like big exciting things. But that said, it's about the daily life, and the discipline that we have in it. And creativity needs boundaries. Like, I love my morning routines. I love the people that I choose to have in my world. Spending time with great people like yourself, the people that really inspire me and are out there making great things. It's all a part of the adventure. It's a trajectory. It's not waves. It's not just highs and lows.
So, can you tell us a little bit about your morning routine? That's always interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I'll share this. It's I call it my Hemingway time, right? And I don't think I've ever said that before either on the podcast. But my Hemingway time is because I love the writer Ernest Hemingway. Right? I love his life. I really, though it ended quite very tragic, but I think he's such an inspiration in many ways, because he was always on a constant battle for the truth.
Yeah.
And my Hemingway time in the morning is I sleep with my phone on airplane mode, and I have the alarms, and I don't wake up to the internet. Like, that's one thing, that phones and everything out of the room. And before I can turn that on and let the world say whatever it needs to say, the first thing I'll do is I take a shower, set myself in, or sometimes go for a run. But to be fully honest, in the mornings, in the winter time, I usually do it a little bit later in the day.
Yeah.
But I'll sit down, light a couple of candles, nothing electronic around me whatsoever, grab a notepad and a pen, and I sit and just write. And I'll do that for about at least 30 minutes, not with an intention to create anything. And I'm not adding it up. It's not going to be, liner notes for a book one day. No, it's just, I need whatever's in me to find its way out and have a home. And that way I know I have set myself up for the day. Right? Before I go into react mode, which is so common when we start looking at these things straight away and all that, I go into proact. And I sit down and I make a conscious decision that this is how I'm going to start. I've let whatever feelings I have in me live on a sheet of paper, and therefore I give myself it feels like I'm giving myself the respect, to have that space, and then you go about your day doing how it goes. But yeah, my Hemingway time, I just write that just because it's
I like that.
Yeah.
There's a sense of peace and calm, and owning the beginning of the day is so important.
Absolutely.
And I have a routine myself, and I noticed the times I'm not able to, or I don't prioritize it has such a huge effect on my days. It's almost a bit scary to see how important it is. Wow. Hemingway time. That's really nice. And and being with people who gives energy, who, being around people who, I also found one thing to be very important for me when it comes to who's close to me in my life. It's this choice, or also ability to rejoice in one another, like be happy for one another, and really, be enthusiastic about the ups and also the downs, but to share the joys. It's so important. And I also believe in children who show this incredible enthusiasm and joy for life, and then many of them are not mirrored with the joy back, and that just that's one of my missions in life. It's to just be a good mirror for other people.
I think you're well on your way for that mission, my friend. Safe to say.
So one more thing that I know you are enthusiastic about, and when you talk, I can hear that this is your way of being. But we both are fan of a mindset called growth mindset, which originally Carol Dweck has written a book called Mindset. She has all these interesting research around the growth mindset compared to the fixed mindset.
Yeah.
How did you discover this? How did it first start affecting your life?
To be honest, it was kind of retrofit.
Oh,
Yeah, because what a big part of what I do for a living, which is how we're on the same speaking agency, is I've been a presenter for a number of years now. So as I said, I don't earn any money from the challenges, but I have a lot of stories and content that directly translate into how teams and people can grow from them.
yes.
And I've been giving talks for years around the world, and that's gone well. And then I remember it was an agency in Australia when I was giving a talk, and the woman that runs it still, she said, it's really great that you're following the growth mindset. And I was like, what is that? And she's like, oh, and they kind of told me, and then I looked into Carol Dweck in the book. I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like it was a brilliant model. And so then so it kind of flipped back around. So it wasn't, all respect to Carol. Carol, love your work. But because of course she's watching this. And I would say that, yeah, and I would say that it wasn't just reading the book and then kind of going that way. It was just having that drive and like ultimately giving yourself the permission, and then realizing that there's barriers in the way that we need to remove to progress. And a lot of time, probably the majority of time, we are that barrier.
Yeah.
Like, so really clearing things out. And I was, I saw this brilliant book in Stockholm, actually, just this last week. I was there for New Year's, and I went to the Fotografiska Museum, and that place is amazing. Their bookshop is my happy place.
Oh, I love museum shops with
It's
all
so
the nice.
cool. Oh, they're my favorite. And there's a book in there called the two don't list.
The two don'ts.
The two don't list.
Yeah.
And it's all about like the elements in life like that we need to remove and make a conscious decision to stop doing. And I think that is a huge thing. Like, so in order to grow, as we said before, creativity needs boundaries. And a lot of times we are the ones that we need to identify that we've got to step out of our own way to be able to progress. And by stepping out of the way, that is not being afraid of failure. You know, that is being able to look at things in life as potentially bringing us a new lesson or taking us to a new level of understanding and growth in life, rather than, ooh, yeah, I don't know how to do that, so I'm just not going to, fixed mindset. And so, yeah, I think there's so many natural levers in growth mindset that it kind of goes through. And of course, as a speaker for corporates, like a lot of times your talk will get fashioned into corporate speak. So that growth mindset, it kind of makes sense. Yeah, it really does.
You have to find a theory to put on that. Let's give it a fancy name.
yeah, absolutely. I love it. That's good.
That's great. And one of the children's books that I have written called Filing, it's actually trying to teach both parents and children about how to give this growth mindset what's needed and how we can recognize each other and to grow that kind of mindset, and that it's all about the process and less about the achievement, and that every failure will give us something, like you just said. So I really like that, and I would like to empower people to believe in that, and that it's not really, it's not a competition. It's not it's just about living our lives as much as possible, and like you said, get away from, well, not be in our own way of actually exploring all these adventures that are on this planet.
Absolutely.
So what you said earlier, you're not that into goals, and you said also that you're writing the story of your life, and how do you want that story to be, the book. And I read yesterday in this Effortless book by Greg McOwen. He said, like, when will you be done? What's your done for the day list? And what's your kind of like bucket list, or when will you say that that book is, yeah, now I did everything I wanted to do. Now I have achieved, I have created the impact I wanted to create. What
Yeah.
what is that like ultimate? How does it look for you today? I know it will probably
Ooh.
change.
You know what just came to mind as you were saying that? I just had this strong feeling of, who do I think I am to be able to speak on behalf of future me? So,
Wow.
like, and that just really came. So when I can perceive when I'll be done
Yeah.
from the Josh I am today,
Yeah.
but the things that I'm going to learn over the time to come,
Mm.
I'll be a different Josh. So I
Yeah.
can't speak for that guy.
No.
So in that mindset, probably never done.
No. No. I hope we're never done.
Yeah.
But where can people find your work and be inspired by all of these amazing adventures?
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of the story gets shared on Instagram. So Josh Stinton at Instagram,
Yeah.
on Instagram. And there will also be there's some exciting news about a documentary project coming up soon with a very, very heavy hitting documentary producer, which I'm very excited about. So we'll see more on that on the Skyrun. And so there's going to be a 4 series. The plan is now a 4 episode mini series for the documentary to be released. So there will be more kind of in-depth stuff on one of the streaming channels, but for now, all the stuff is going on Instagram.
Yeah. Wow. And the last thing I'm going to ask you today, Josh, is what would be your, if people are watching this and they're thinking, oh, I would like to give more too. I would like to, if it's charity or something else, like, what do you want to say to people who are having these thoughts right now?
One thing I would say is, keep in mind that helping one person does change the world. And often when we think of the idea of helping others, we think, well, how it becomes maybe fatiguing, because we're like, oh, there's so many people, there's so many kids, there's so many causes, or this, I'm getting calls for that. And we don't have the capacity to be able to take on all of it, first off. So give ourselves the peace of that, but just one person. And sometimes that person is actually you to begin with. You know, and sometimes we need to understand that maybe we need to be that person that we want to help for a little while, and then we have a better platform to be able to help others. As they say, when the airplane takes off, the oxygen mask drops. You got to put yours on first before you can help the person next to you. Sometimes, yeah, you've got to help your base has to be strong. So just one person at a time.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Josh. And yeah, I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to following all the Josh you will become and create yourself into. It's so amazing. Thank you very much.
Let's talk again soon.
Yes. Bye.